Chapter 10 is a good chapter because we're talking about motivating employees. And there are concepts in chapter 10 that you're pretty much going to see in business school at some point in time. I don't know if you're going to go into accounting or finance or what you guys are all going to go into. Everybody has different stuff, of course. But if you go into marketing or if you go into management, you're going to see these. Even if you go in the others, you're probably going to run into these again. So these are really good concepts to know. By the way, the summer schedule is coming out. I think it may have come out Monday or it's coming out this week sometime. I'm teaching this class again, of course, and I'm also teaching Business 200, which is Principles of Management. So if any of you want to sign up for that, as of right now, that class is on campus. I think it's like 9:30 on Tuesday mornings. It is on campus, but they may switch it to virtual. You never know with the school. There's just no way of telling at this point. But as of right now, it is on campus. But if any of you need that class, it's going to be available in a 10-week course over the summer. I'll be teaching it. So let's talk about motivating employees and talk about what we mean. Well, you're talking about worker job satisfaction. In a nutshell, you're talking about morale. How do you keep up morale? And you hear this all the time in management. You talk about morale because morale is important. Happy workers can lead to happy guests. Yeah, or customers. I can't use the same customers. They always taught us not to say that. Too cold of a word in hospitality. Well, like guests. There you are. Guests, like when someone comes in your house. I prefer that. But customers, sure. But your happy workers make your business happy because they're going to take care of your customers or guests better if they're happy. If they're unhappy, first of all, they're probably going to leave, which can get really, really costly. People don't understand. It's not, yes, if they leave, you have to rehire. That costs money. You have to retrain. That costs money. But a lot of times what companies don't add in is the loss in productivity, all right? You lose a ton in productivity. Why? Because you bring in these new people. It's going to take them, depending on what they're doing, it could take them months to get up to speed, or even a year to get up to speed where the older person was that you lost. It's like when we lose a good cook, man, I used to hate losing a good cook because, with someone who loved the job and did a great job, but then you bring in someone new, you get someone who's not as experienced and you train them and they may be a really good employee, but they're not going to be at that experience level. It's going to take them sometimes months to get up to that experience level. And it's a rough process and you do lose money. You lose unseen money that's hard to record because you're losing it in productivity. And there are ways to track productivity. We'll talk about that in accounting session down the road, but it's not always 100% accurate. There's also engagement, the employee's level of motivation, passion, and commitment. Engagement is key because employees, if they're not engaged and they're unhappy, they're going to act that out at work. And they're going to bring down the morale of the other workers as well. It's going to affect the other workers' effort. My wife has a coworker who she's actually very good friends with, who they moved from one company to another. They're in finance, so the whole group moved from Merrill Lynch over to Morgan Stanley. And this woman she's disengaged. She hates it. She wished they never moved. Well, she had a choice. She could have stayed in Merrill Lynch and gone with someone else, but she was kind of between a rock and a hard place because she would have, why am I not on? Hold on, I apologize. There we go. She would have made as much money with another group of Merrill Lynch. This group is very, very profitable. So she made the move, but now she's miserable. And my wife just texted me right before class and said, oh, great, she's here. And this was one of her friends, and I'm like, honey, it's all right. She's like, when we see her outside of work, she's fine, but she walks into work miserable because she's disengaged. And they need to be able to do more, and they are trying to get her more engaged. She's a tough cookie, I'll put it that way. But employee experience is a level of satisfaction at every step along the employee's path at a company. The whole time they're there, you want to have a certain level of satisfaction because that's going to decrease your turnover. People are not going to leave. And it's also going to give better customer service to your guests. So see, I use the customer and guest in that sentence. I like doing that. All right, so let's talk about the value of it. What motivates people? How do you get them going? Well, there are intrinsic awards and extrinsic awards. Intrinsic awards are ones that you feel when you do something well or you complete a goal. It's pride in your performance. It's a sense of achievement. It's the ability, it's the knowing you did something well, right? Knowing that you achieved something, that you accomplished something. Is that feeling that you get. Extrinsic rewards come from somebody else. Someone else gave you these. It's a pay raise, which, yes, makes you feel good, but it came from somebody else. It's praise. You know, pat on the back. Hey, good job today. Hey, you saved the day. You made this shift work. You kept us all in there. Or promotions, getting promoted at work. These are all extrinsic awards, but they do both motivate people to a certain extent, and they actually work together. We're going to talk about, you know, what ones actually motivate people more, intrinsic or extrinsic. Intrinsic rewards, one important type of motivator, of course, is the intrinsic award. When you feel like we just said, you got a job well done, right? And people who respond to such inner promptings often enjoy their work and share their enthusiasm with others. They do. They will. Yeah, it's like the old saying: a bad apple spoils the batch. It does, but a good apple also helps keep everybody happy. Nothing brings workers down quicker than having to work with people who are miserable and don't want to be there and are just not getting the job done. And the author asks, are you more strongly motivated by your own desire to do well or by intrinsic rewards like pay and recognition? I don't want you to answer that yet because we're going to talk about that. But I want you to think about which one yourself motivates you more. Is it the pay and the recognition, or is it your own desire to do well? Recognition is important, and we're going to play Name That Company again to most employees. This company introduced an oddly named yet prestigious award within the company. It's called the Golden Banana Award. It was created when an employee solved a problem and a manager grabbed a banana from his lunch and gave it to him. So this was the very first Golden Banana Award. So my question, no, wait, I'm going to put up the poll. My question is, which company is it? Who do you think started the Golden Banana Award? Some of you may have heard of it. All right, come on. There's 4 more of you in class today. Let's get everyone in on this. These answers are very interesting. Very interesting. All right, couple more seconds. I got 18 out of 20. Can I get the other 2? 2 of you aren't paying attention. All right, I'm going to end the poll. 3, 2, 1. All right, we got 18 again. Let me share the results. These are very mixed results. 3 of you said Walmart. 2 of you said IBM. 5 of you said Hewlett Packard, and 8 of you said Whole Foods. It's Hewlett Packard. The Golden Banana Award is the famous award at Hewlett Packard. Hewlett Packard is a very old company. I threw Walmart in there. I was curious. I threw IBM in because it was another tech company. But I threw Whole Foods in because it would make sense, right? Like Whole Foods would have a whole Golden Banana Award. But it's not Whole Foods, guys. It is Hewlett Packard. They're the ones that came up with it. A great company, by the way, Hewlett Packard. Fantastic. I have friends who've worked for them. They just absolutely love them. So what you're trying to prevent is stress at work. And he says, are you stressed? And these are warnings of employee stress. And when you're working, when you're managing, you have to look for this stuff, right? Negative attitudes about work. All of a sudden they have a drop in productivity. They're late chronically. They're missing work a lot. They're careless with details. They don't care. They're not putting their heart into it anymore. Unable to get quality sleep. You'll hear them complaining about they can't sleep at night. And that happens to everybody. I mean, sometimes that can be for natural reasons. I'm usually a pretty good sleeper. Every once in a while I can't get a good night's sleep, but most of the times I can. But not everyone, for like my wife, she struggles with it more than I do. And neither one of us are stressed out. It's just a natural thing. Withdraw from coworkers. They will withdraw. You won't see them as much. They just withdraw socially as well. Like they used to come to happy hours and stuff and they don't. By the way, the woman I was talking about earlier in the lecture, This describes her perfectly, what she's like right now. She's stressed. Problem is, they made this move from one company to another 2 years ago. 2 years ago, and she's still acting this way. And it's an issue. It's a problem, and they're trying to deal with it. So how do you help? Well, you reach out to coworkers, families, and friends for support, right? Make time to exercise if you're stressed out. With exercise, I tell you what, I don't work out hard, as you can probably tell, but when I do work out, I feel better, man. Nothing feels better than go down, hit the gym for like 40 minutes. We have a gym downstairs in the building, and then come up and get a shower. It feels fantastic. Healthier foods will release stress. A lot of your unhealthy foods and too much alcohol will lead to stress too, guys. Yes, I write a beer column. I write about beer and bourbon and cigars, but there is such thing as too much of a good thing. And, you got to remain healthy. I know, I mean, even with drinking, you got to remember something about alcohol. It's a depressant. It is a depressant. So, it may cheer you up for a little while, but when you're done with the buzz, you're probably going to feel worse. Focus on positive thinking. It's very easy to have the negative, Mr. Negative, come on in your head and tell you everything that's wrong with your life and the world. Try to shut that guy in your head up and start listening to the positive guy in your head or girl in your head. Plan regular breaks. Don't work yourself to death. It says choose healthy foods as well from earlier. Let me put another thing on that. Make sure you eat lunch. When I don't eat lunch, my blood sugar drops. And when blood sugar drops, I start becoming miserable. And I catch myself I'm like, why am I in such a bad mood? I haven't eaten. I'll forget to eat. That's my problem. I'll forget to eat. I'll get caught up in what I'm doing and I'll forget to eat. Dan Jones, that is spot on. Yeah, I think it is, Dan. Plan regular breaks, eat your lunch, develop a consistent sleep schedule. That's easier said than done. I try to get to bed around the same time every night. Do I? Not always, but I try to. And prioritize your tasks. Get the big things. You know what? My mom hated washing dishes. So the minute we were done with dinner, she got up and washed the dishes. Why? She hated doing it. It shows she got it out of the way. And that's the thing. If there's something you don't want to do it. Get it out of the way. The sooner you get it out of the way, the less stress you're going to have. That's seriously how it works. I try to do that. Am I good at it? No. I'm as human as the next man. But it will help with stress if you can do that. Trust me. Because I have done it. It does work. I'm just not good at doing it all the time. So now we're going to get into the different theories. The first one is Frederick Taylor. Frederick Taylor is the father of scientific management. This was back in earlier 1900s. And it was a study of their study workers to find the most efficient ways of doing things and then teaching people to use those techniques. But the thing was, it's the first time science was brought in for management purposes, at least when it comes to people. There were three key elements to increase productivity: time, in other words, managing it properly, methods of work, and the rules of work were what were employed. They did time motion studies. They studied which tasks must be performed to complete a job and the time related to each task. So a lot of this was factory work, all right, they were looking at. And efficiency became the standard for setting goals. So they were trying to figure out how to set things up and how to work with workers on doing things so they're being as efficient as they possibly can. Frank and Lillian Gilbreth developed the principle of motion economy. That was a theory that every jar can be broken down to a series of elementary motions, and it can. But there's a problem with scientific management, and you can see it in that last bullet point. It views people like machines. It has no empathy, none. I mean, they're not talking about breaks. They're not talking about rest time. They're not talking about downtime. They're not talking about eating lunch. All they're studying is the efficient way to do something like you're a robot. And back in those days, they treated people that way, right? This is before the labor movement got big. This is back when people were working, 14 hours a day, 7 days a week to make a living. And if you didn't show up one day, they fired you because there were no laws or rules that protected you. So scientific management, now some good things came out of it, all right? But for use, later on they figured out this doesn't really work. Or I shouldn't say doesn't work. This has to be redone because you're treating people like machines, and you can't treat people like things. You have to treat people like people. UPS tells their drivers how to get out of the trucks, how fast to walk, how many packages to pick up and deliver every day, and even how to hold their keys. The author asks if you can see the scientific management of this. You can, by teaching people the best way to perform a task. But is UPS wrong for doing this? And do you think the reason they're doing this is scientific management, or do you think it's another reason? Why do you guys think? Think about it for a second, put it in the comments. Why do you think UPS, big company, popular company, would be this way with their employees? What do you think their reason would be? I want to see if someone takes a good guess. It's not an easy question, I understand that. Anybody want to take a stab at it? It's a little challenging, I know. What we got? I got one. They want to be as uniform and efficient as possible. Yes, they do. Control? No, not really control. I guess maybe a small amount of control. They do want to be uniform and efficient, but there's another reason they're doing this. It's a good answer. It's not what I'm looking for. Increase profits by increasing efficiency? Yes, John, but there's another reason. It's something we haven't talked about. Can anyone tell me scientific management, they want to save as much time as possible? Yes, that is part of it. That is part of it. Who can tell me what ergonomics is? Anyone know what ergonomics is? You ever heard that term?
Efficiency.
What is it?
Efficiency.
Yes, it's basically watching people's motions and the way they do things to keep them from getting hurt. All right. Some of the earlier studies in my industry were done with housekeepers. In our industry, the majority, the most injuries you would think come from a kitchen, they don't. They come from housekeeping in hotels because it's repetitive tasks. And they found that by changing equipment, by changing the way they do things, by giving them certain equipment, they could cut down. These women were hurting their backs, they were hurting their knees, they were hurting their hips. You know, they're changing linen on beds, and beds are king size beds are very heavy. The mattresses are very heavy. They were vacuuming standing up where they had to lean over to vacuum, doing that over time. Repetitive cleaning. They were getting carpal tunnel syndrome and problems with their elbows, because the hardest injuries to catch, guys, are the ones that happen over time. So beyond scientific management, and one of the good things that came out of studying movement from scientific management was the idea of ergonomics. And ergonomics is finding better and safer ways for people to do things that don't cause mainly repetitive injuries. If you see housekeepers in hotels now, they're not bent over with an old-fashioned vacuum. The vacuum's on their back and the handle is longer, and they're standing vacuuming. And because it's on their back, there's less pressure on their lower back. They're not getting hurt. They now have special jacks they can slide between the mattress and the box springs and jack it up, and they could use that to lift the mattress to do the sheets and stuff. There's all kinds of ways they've come up to help them. Now, do they still get hurt? Yes. You know what? They still have to get on their hands and knees at times, scrub floors and stuff like that. So, but a lot of people don't realize they were, in our industry, the leading area that got injured most of the time. So what UPS is doing with all this, they're not just looking at efficiency. We got to remember something. They're actually a pretty good company. They're looking at not just efficiency, but you have to look at safety too, because when your employees get hurt, it costs you money. Yes, you're paying for workers' comp insurance, but you have to pay into that fund. And the more workers you get hurt, the more the state's going to charge you to pay into that fund. So there is a safety issue there as well. So talk about the value of motion. Elton Mayo did management science a favor with what they call the Hawthorne study. And the researchers study worker efficiency under different levels of light. So they were changing the levels of light and to see if it would affect worker efficiency. They involved the workers on this. They told the workers what they were doing, and the productivity increased regardless of the light condition. So the actual virtual experiments, they looked at it and said, well, this doesn't make sense. We're decreasing and increasing the light, but the productivity staying the same, where it actually got better. It increased. They figured out it was human psychology. It was psychological factors that were at play. The Hawthorne effect is the tendency for people to act differently when they know they're being studied. It led to a lot more than that. It's not just when they know they're being studied. What Hawthorne figured out was, or what little did he know, they actually came from the research that he did. He was out of Harvard University, but it changed the manager's beliefs in employee motivation forever. Because what they figured out from this research, I mean, Mayo himself didn't figure it out, but what he figured out, by his research, which was done at the Hawthorne plant at Western Electric in Cicero, Illinois. That's why it's called the Hawthorne study. It gave birth to the concept of human-based motivation by showing that employees behave differently simply because they were involved in planning and executing experiments. It made them happy. Like, oh boy, we get to be part of something. We're not just here laboring. All right. I mean, look at that picture. Look how long ago that was. It's like from the late 40s, early 50s. All right. We're not just not in here laboring, right? We get to be part of some scientific study, and they got happy about it, and they worked harder, and they worked better, and it didn't matter what the late settings were. So Hawthorne actually opened a huge, huge door for everyone with this, and he didn't even realize it at the time. Later on, and this is one you need to know, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We're going to jump out of this, out of the PowerPoint for a second. We're going to talk about Maslow, but we're going to do a, did I say, no, I didn't. What's wrong with me? Give me 1 second, guys. I'll set up the video for you. Maslow is important. Maslow is used to this day. And I laughed. I was reading a book by a consultant a couple years ago. And one of the things he says in the book, it was about doing consulting work. And he actually had some really good pointers in there. But one of the things he said was, does anybody really think that they still use Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Yeah, actually they do. They do. It's still widely used and widely talked about in management circles. So we're going to watch the video. Oh, let me click my buttons. You guys are probably sort of sick of hearing about the buttons. All right, let's click the buttons. Let's get this where it needs to go. And here you go. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We'll talk about it after the video.
One of the most legendary ideas in the history of psychology is located in an unassuming triangle divided into 5 sections referred to universally simply as Maslow's pyramid of needs. This profoundly influential pyramid first saw the world in an academic journal in the United States in 1943, where it was crudely drawn in black and white and surrounded by dense and jargon-rich text. It has since become a mainstay of psychological analyses, business presentations, and TED Talks, and grown ever more colourful and emphatic in the process. The pyramid was the work of a 35-year-old Jewish psychologist of Russian origins called Abraham Maslow, who'd been looking since the start of his professional career for nothing less than the meaning of life. No longer part of the close-knit orthodox family of his youth, Maslow wanted to find out what could make life purposeful for people, himself included, in modern-day America, a country where the pursuit of money and fame seemed to have eclipsed any more interior or authentic aspirations. He saw psychology as the discipline that would enable him to answer the yearnings and questions that people had once taken to religion. He suddenly saw that human beings could be said to have essentially 5 different kinds of need. On the one hand, the psychological, or what one could term, without any mysticism being meant by the word, the spiritual, and on the other, the material. For Maslow, we all start with a set of utterly non-negotiable and basic physiological needs for food, water, warmth, and rest. In addition, we have urgent safety needs for bodily security and protection from attack. But then we start to enter the spiritual domain. We need belongingness and love. We need friends and lovers. We need esteem and respect. And lastly, and most grandly, we are driven by what Maslow called, in a now legendary term, an urge for self-actualization, a vast, touchingly nebulous, and yet hugely apt concept involving what Maslow described as living according to one's full potential and becoming who we really are. Part of the reason why the description of these needs, laid out in pyramid form, has proved so persuasive is their capacity to capture a profound structural truth about human existence. Maslow was putting his finger with unusual deftness and precision on a set of answers to very large questions that tend to confuse and perplex us viciously, particularly when we're young. Namely, what are we really after? What do we long for? And how do we arrange our priorities and give due regard for the different and competing claims we have on our attention? Maslow was reminding us with artistic concision of the shape of an ideal, well-lived life, proposing at once that we cannot live by our spiritual callings alone, but also that it cannot be right to remain focused only on the material either. We need, in order to be whole, both the material and the spiritual realms to be attended to, the base lending support while the summit offers upward direction and definition. Maslow was rebutting calls from two kinds of zealots. Firstly, over-ardent spiritual types who might urge us to forget entirely about money, housing, a good insurance policy, and enough to pay for lunch. But he was also fighting against extreme, hard-nosed pragmatists who might imply that life was simply a brute process of putting food on the table and going to the office. Both camps had, for Maslow, misunderstood the complexity of the human animal. Unlike other creatures, we truly are multifaceted, called at once to unfurl our soul according to its inner destiny, and to make sure we'll be able to pay the bills at the end of the month. Operating at the heyday of American capitalism, Maslow was interestingly ambivalent about business. He was awed by the material resources of large corporations around him, but at the same time he lamented that almost all their economic activity was, unfairly and bizarrely, focused on honoring customers' needs at the bottom of his pyramid. America's largest companies were helping people to have a roof over their heads, feeding them, moving them around, and ensuring they could talk to each other long distance. But they seemed utterly uninterested in trying to fulfill the essential spiritual appetites defined on the higher slopes of his pyramid. Towards the end of his long life, Maslow expressed a hope that businesses could, in time, learn to make more of their profits from addressing not only our basic needs, but also, and as importantly, our higher spiritual and psychological ones as well. That would be truly enlightened capitalism. In the personal sphere, Maslow's pyramid remains a hugely useful object to turn to whenever we're trying to assess the direction of our lives. Often, as we reflect upon it, we start to notice that we really haven't arranged and balanced our needs as wisely and elegantly as we might. Some lives have got an implausibly wide base. All the energy seems directed towards material accumulation. At the same time, there are lives with an opposite problem, where we've not paid due heed to our need to look after our fragile and vulnerable bodies. Maslow's beautifully simple visual cue is, above anything else, a portrait of a life lived in harmony with the complexities of our nature. We should, at our less frantic moments, use it to reflect with newfound focus on what it is we might do next.
Our decision dice are a tool to help you make
You good?
I'm good. Thank you for checking.
The thing just, the video just cut out and the screen went black.
Okay, but the video was over, right? Or at the very end?
Towards.
Yeah, because I was watching it with you guys. It should have been at the very end. I'm the one that cut it out. So it was on the end. But basically, guys, with Maslow, he's used a lot in business because we use Maslow for management. We also use Maslow for marketing. All right. So we use his theory in both aspects. His theory of motivation is met on unmet human needs. Psychological, as he said in the video, psychological, safety, social, and esteem needs that need to self-actualization. He believed motivation arises from need. He thought that's how you motivate people, through appealing to the needs that they have. And here are the needs that they have. Once one need has been met, it doesn't motivate anymore. If a need is filled, you move on to higher needs. Self-actualization was to Maslow achieving something in your life. And it doesn't have to be, I walked on the moon, or I wrote the world's greatest novel. It can be, I had a family. It can be, I graduated college. For me, I write a column for a magazine. That was a self-actualization for me. I wanted, toward the end of my career, to teach. This is a self-actualization for me. So it can be a lot of different things. But if you look at the pyramid, those needs at the bottom, if they're not met, and this is where we're talking, because we're talking about employee motivation, we will use this same theory when we talk about marketing. We will talk about Maslow again. But for employee motivation, those psychological and safety needs, think about it. If you don't have food, if you don't have water, if you don't have a roof over your head, if you're struggling in those ways, you're not going to focus on anything else. I had an employee once who was going downhill. He was a waiter. I was playing Hollywood, Chicago. I could see it. And I pulled him aside and I talked to him. And he came, because he came in one day smelling terrible. And I pulled him, I could tell he hadn't showered. I said, Matthew, what's going on with you? And you need to talk to me, because I can't let you out on the floor this way. And he got all upset. And he admitted to me that he had been kicked out of his apartment, was living in his car. So I pulled some other employees aside. We got him on someone's couch for a few days. We got him into a shower. We made sure he had food. He was working shifts. He was making money. And we eventually got him in an apartment and got him a roommate. It took a little while, but we did it. Somebody needed a roommate and we got him in. But he was doing horrible because he wasn't meeting those basic needs. He didn't have a roof over his head. He couldn't wash his clothes. He couldn't take a shower. But once you have hit those, then it's social needs, which is belonging, right? It's being part of something. People want to be part of something. That's motivating. Esteem needs, which is being respected mostly. That's motivating. Or self-actualizing, achieving something you've wanted to achieve for a long time. Those are motivating as well. So we're going to talk more about Maslow as we get in the lecture, because Maslow plays into some of the other theories that we're going to talk about. But right now, I'd say it's 25 after. It's almost 25 after. Let's come back. Let's take 15 minutes. Let's come back at 20 till. All right. Pause the recording. Let's come back at 20 till. I've been talking your ear off today. There. All right. So you go from Maslow and you move on to Herzberg. And Herzberg's research is similar. He asked what creates enthusiasm for workers and what makes them work to full potential. Maslow asked more of, what do we want out of life? His questioning was bigger. Herzberg's was more focused on work itself. And he found John content factors were most important to workers. They wanted to be content. They wanted to feel good at work. They wanted to feel like they were contributing something to the company. So this was also different than any research had been done before. As you see, it's very different than Frederick Taylor's theories of motivation about scientific management. They're actually considering the workers' feelings and their wants and where they want to go with their life and that sort of thing. And what Herzberg said was that job environment factors maintain satisfaction, but didn't motivate. So he broke things down into motivators and hygiene factors. Motivators were factors that cause employees to be productive and that give them satisfaction. His hygiene factors were different. They didn't unmotivate people, all right? But if they were missing, they led to dissatisfaction, and then that would cause motivation to drop or morale to drop. So these hygiene factors were things that had to be there and had to be working properly. And if you had those, then the motivators are what you focused on to get people to move up. But if the hygiene factors weren't there or weren't working properly, the motivators were worthless. So it's almost like Maslow, where you at the bottom, you have the hierarchy of needs. You have the bottom needs that if they're not met, forget about the top needs, the three at the top, the self-actualization, the esteem, and the belonging. Forget that. If you're not meeting the physiological and safety needs, you're not going to even touch those other ones. His research was similar in that way, but he took a really different approach. So he had his motivators and his hygiene, which he called maintenance factors. So let's look at the hygiene first, company policy and administration. Remember, he's saying that these factors can cause dissatisfaction, but changing them will have little motivation effect. So they had to be satisfying, these factors, these hygiene factors, which I call them hygiene factors. The company policy and administration had to satisfy workers. The supervision had to be satisfactory. In other words, it couldn't be bringing people down, and it had to be there. You can't have no supervision because that can lead even to chaos, and that can be dissatisfying as well. The working conditions were a hygiene factor. He basically, was saying that your working conditions have to be good. They have to be satisfactory to the employees. The interpersonal relations with the coworkers. Now you're getting into the corporate culture, how people talk to each other, how people treat each other, that sort of thing. And salary status and job security was a hygiene factor. In other words, your salary had to be satisfactory. Your job status had to be what you considered fair, what it should be. And you had to be secure in your job. He's saying once all these hygiene factors are met, they're not going to motivate anybody, but you can then build on that because your workers are not dissatisfied. Then you go to the motivators, which he said the first one was the work itself. All right, the work itself, achievement. Being able to move up, being able to create things, being able to make things happen, recognition, being called out for doing something well, getting that pat on the back, responsibility. Most people want responsibility to some extent. Some people don't want a lot of responsibility. I have one of my best friends, I laugh. He hates responsibility. He doesn't want to make any decisions or anything, but he's rare. Most people aren't like that. He likes being told what to do. I mean, he doesn't, he never, he's an IT guy, and he does a help desk thing, and for a big company, he makes good money. But it's like he doesn't want to do any projects. He doesn't want to do anything like that. Hey, it works for him. He actually has done pretty well. And growth and advancement. So to Herzberg, these are motivators, but they don't work unless the hygiene factors are met. So it's similar to Maslow in that way. And if you look at the two, right? Look at the bottom, Maslow's bottom of his, what would be a pyramid. He did a column here to make a point. You think you could compare them. But the psychological needs, Herzberg would say, well, salary and personal life were at the bottom when it came to hygiene factors. What Maslow called safety needs, having a roof over your head, clothing on your back, being able to walk down the street. Herzberg said, company policy administration, job security, and working conditions. So Maslow was focusing more on life. Herzberg was focusing more on just work. So, but he's saying if you don't hit these factors, these hygiene factors, you can't work on the motivation factors. And Maslow said very similar. He said, if you don't satisfy those safety and psychological needs, you can't work on the social esteem or self-actualization. By the way, you'll hear me call the social ones belonging sometimes. Sometimes you hear, I think Maslow originally called them belonging needs, and you'll hear me say that because that's how I learned it, but it's the same thing. The social and the belonging are the same thing. It's being part of something. It's being part of the group. But what Maslow called social in the work environment, Herzberg called interpersonal, very similar. Superiors, subordinates, peers, and supervision. What Maslow called esteem needs, Herzberg said, well, these were motivational because now you're moving out of the hygiene factors. Now you're getting into what Herzberg called motivational factors. What Maslow called esteem, which was being respected and treated well at work or in life. Herzberg called advancement, recognition, and status. So there is a similarity there. And where Maslow talked about self-actualization, Herzberg talked about the work itself, achievement, and possibility for growth. Well, achievement is a big part of self-actualization. So they do play into each other. A lot of work that came after Maslow played off of Maslow. It wasn't unusual to see things play off of Maslow. So how do you put vigor back into life of a workforce? There are ways to do it. And I used to fix restaurants, and I've told you that's hard, ugly work. And you get a lot of satisfaction when you're done, but doing it, it's a rough time. You're going in and basically just firing people and redoing the whole place. You keep most of the staff. You have to, unfortunately, let some of them go, and you're saying, well, let management go and all that. But there are ways to do it. Take on new challenges to eliminate boredom. All right. Redecorate your space and get away from the same old, same old. I'll tell you what, it works. It works. Take your space and just redo it. Right. It'll help you. It'll help bring vigor back into your work life. Take on new challenges. I mean, redecorating is what made me think of the restaurant thing. Because a lot of times we would go in, we would renovate the restaurant as well, and the staff loved it because it was new. It would get them fired up. It would get them motivated. Don't complain and think of things to celebrate. Okay, you're going to do a certain amount of complaining. We're all human. All right, but don't focus on complaining. My wife's friend, who I talked about earlier in the lecture, complains all the time. She has one friend that complains even worse. I rarely see her, thank God. I'm not big on people complaining. By the way, there's an old rule in business when you go out after work. So just so you know this, it's called a 30-minute rule. You're allowed to complain for 30 minutes about work. After that, you have to move on to something else. No one wants to talk about work longer than 30 minutes. So you go out, you have your first drink, you take 30 minutes and you get it off your chest, whatever you need off your chest. But then you move on to other things. My wife's one friend, not the one I referred to, the other one who complains all the time. She complained for 2 hours and she got mad at me one time. I told her she was breaking the 30-minute rule. I'm like, I don't want to sit here for 2 hours at happy hour and listen to you complain about work. You kidding me? I came out to have fun. Oh, for good God. But that's just the way things are sometimes. Help others and advance their careers. It's amazing the feeling we get when we help other people. It's part of the reason I'm so heavily involved with my charity. In fact, I'm the president. I run it right now. It's part of the reason I'm so into that. It just makes you feel great. It really does. And when you help other people, and they don't have to be needy, you help others. He says, advance in their careers. Absolutely. When you help someone move up, when I used to get managers underneath me and promoted, it made me proud as hell. I look around a company and I would see managers at AGM and GM levels that I got them there. Loved it. Loved it. So a little test prep. What are the similarities and difference between Taylor's time motion studies and Mayo's Hawthorne studies? Well, Taylor inspired those Hawthorne studies. And then Mayo was the one who determined that, my dog's barking, I with a landmark. Mayo was the one who determined that there were other things we can learn by studying our workers. He later determined that people who were empowered worked harder, which is huge. And we've talked about empowerment, right? Ultimately, Mayo's study brought about behavioral management. He was the beginning of it. How did Mayo's findings influence scientific management? Well, they completely changed how people thought about employee motivation. They always thought money was the prime factor, and they find out it's not. In fact, when employees list what motivates them at work, money is usually at the bottom. Fairness will be up in there, and they want to be paid fairly. They'll put that in there. But money, if you're miserable at work, pay me all the money that you want. I don't care. I'm miserable and I'm leaving. These new assumptions led to many theories about the human side of motivation, which is where we really got into and where we're really about to talk about. And we just talked about Esberg and his hygiene factors, how they're satisfiers. And once these satisfiers are met, then you can start focusing on the motivational factors and motivate your people. Douglas McGregor's theory X and Y is one of the biggest motivational theories out there. And it too was built on Maslow. So we're going to cut out here and we're going to go to a video on McGregor. And let me pull that up real quick. We're going to go to a video on McGregor. Let me get over there. 1 second, guys. Sorry, I thought I had this set up in advance, and I didn't. All right, apologize for that. There's McGregor. All right. So we're going to watch a video. Then we'll talk about McGregor, and we'll talk about what he accomplished.
Douglas McGregor is a really influential figure in organizational communication, management, and organizational studies more generally. He was a professor at MIT in Massachusetts. He was a vocal advocate for the human relations approach, which is a alternative or counterpoint to the classical style of management. He was very interested in what motivates people to work hard, and especially our beliefs about what motivates people to work hard. His ideas gained a lot of momentum in the 1960s. At the core, he was focused on how our beliefs shape our behavior. And then, of course, how that behavior shapes other people's behavior around us. He articulated Theory X as what he saw as the dominant belief system about employees. And the premises are as follows. The average man is by nature indolent. He works as little as possible. In other words, most managers at the time coming out of that factory era believed that employees were inherently lazy. He lacks ambition, dislikes responsibility, and prefers to be led. He is inherently self-centered, indifferent to organizational needs. He is by nature resistant to change. He is gullible, not very bright, the ready dupe of the charlatan and demagogue. In other words, people aren't very smart and they're easily manipulated. According to Theory X beliefs that McGregor articulated, without this active intervention by management, people would be passive, even resistant to organizational needs. They must therefore be persuaded, rewarded, punished, controlled. Their activities must be directed. This is, by the way, not what McGregor thought about employees, about workers. He's articulating the Theory X belief at the time, the traditional managerial view of employees. The problem with it, of course, is that it centers on control. And as we'll see, that's not necessarily going to lead to the best results. So Theory X beliefs about people result in very tight control, strict policies, and a punishments and rewards system that reinforces those beliefs. So you have a boss, and if he's thinking in his head, everybody's lazy, then he's going to be talking to them in relatively harsh ways, and they might outwardly say, okay, yeah, we'll go along with that, but they're not really enjoying the process very much. They're not really enjoying working there, and so they're not going to work very hard. According to McGregor, force breeds counterforces. So you have Theory X beliefs that then lead to your own controlling practices toward employees, and then employees in many cases will resist. The results will not be great. People aren't going to be working very hard if they're busy resisting. That then reinforces the Theory X beliefs about employees. You look around and you see this circle going over and over again every day, and it's not going to lead to very productive results for the organization, and it reinforces a negative cycle for everybody. For this reason, McGregor articulated Theory Y, and this is a little more aligned with what he believed for the most part. And that is the expenditure of physical and mental effort in work is as natural as play or rest. This is very different from calling people lazy. He thought people could work hard and enjoy it. External control and threat of punishment are not the only means for bringing about effort toward organizational objectives. Man will exercise self-direction and self-control in the service of objectives to which he is committed. In other words, if people agree with the goals and they're committed to them, they'll work really hard. Under the conditions of modern industrial life, the intellectual potentialities of the average human being are only partially utilized. That's another way of saying that we don't really tap the potential of most employees at work. Commitment to objectives is a function of the rewards associated with their achievement. So if people believe in the goals and they have rewards associated with those goals and objectives, they'll work hard. The most significant of such rewards, such as the satisfaction of ego and the self-actualization needs, can be direct products of efforts directed toward organizational objectives. That's another way of saying that if the organization arranges things the right way, that employees can have their ego needs satisfied, their self-actualization needs satisfied while working towards the organization's goals. Average human being learns under proper conditions not only to accept, but to seek responsibility. So they're ready to lead. They don't need to be pushed around. They're ready to step up. The capacity to exercise a relatively high degree of imagination, ingenuity, and creativity in the solution of organizational problems is widely, not narrowly distributed in the population. He wants it to be clear that he's not just talking about the best of the best employees. He's saying that on average, most people have a really high potential. Theory Y in practice looks different than Theory X in practice. If you have Theory Y beliefs about people, then you're going to arrange things so that individuals can achieve their own goals and happily accomplish the organization's goals at the same time. Theory Y managers, in other words, will make different choices about how they reward people, how they talk to people, how they arrange their teams and their work process so that people can enjoy work and get the job done. You may notice that this has a lot of resemblance to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. McGregor used this hierarchy to shape his view of theory X and theory Y. To recap, the physiological needs at the bottom of the pyramid are really important. That's our food, shelter, clothing kinds of needs, our physical needs. And once we meet those, we can start focusing on our safety needs. And he really saw that these two basic needs were all that was being engaged at work. Up the next level is our need for belonging or love and relationships. Above that is esteem. We want to feel good about what we're doing, feel good about ourselves. And at the top level is self-actualization, which is a little hard to pin down, but it's when we are reaching our full potential as individuals. And from McGregor's standpoint, most managerial philosophies that lined up with theory X were really only assuming that people had physiological and safety needs, and that was the only thing that was motivating them. He said, well, we're really missing out. And theory Y helps us see that we can tap into these higher level needs that all people have. And so this is not really a case of opposites where theory X and theory Y are opposites. He saw them on this continuum on Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that we can continue to engage these higher level needs and desires of employees, and that's going to make them work hard and enjoy the work as they do it. McGregor's work has been incredibly influential. According to Google Scholar, it's been cited over 12,000 times and counting. Most work isn't cited by anybody, and if it is, maybe only by a few other researchers, but his work has been really foundational to organizational studies, foundational to organizational communication and management studies. And that's one of the reasons why we study McGregor, for his
So McGregor was huge, and he based a lot of what he did. He based it off of Maslow. Like I told you, a lot of this stuff is based off of Maslow. And, you know, this whole theory X and theory Y, which they explain very well in the video, the theory X view of people was what McGregor saw going on at the time. It wasn't what he believed. He didn't believe you should treat people this way, but this is the way it was. The old belief in management that dates back to the late 17, early 1800s was that people were lazy. They had to be controlled. They had to be directed. You had to use, you know, a stick on them. And if they were good, you gave them a carrot. It was the carrot and stick method, you know, and you couldn't trust them. Never entrust your staff. Never trust your employees was the theory X way. And this was what was going on at the time in most management and what he saw. Now, theory Y came out and said that people like to work, that they like to see goals, that they are naturally committed, that they like to solve problems, and they want to be part of everything. And the main thing he said was, we're not getting the potential out of everyone we have and on our staff and in our employees and managers and everybody if we're treating them in a theory X method. You treat them in theory Y method and you nurture them and grow them, and you're going to get more out of them. That was the biggest part of his theory. He felt there were 3 steps to empowerment. Find out what people think the problems of the organization are. Let them design the solutions. Let them figure it out. You give them guidance, but let them figure it out, and get out of the way and let them put those solutions into action. You're making them part of the process, and you're actually at this point doing this. You're using the esteem needs from Maslow. You're using the social needs from Maslow, and even the self-actualization need to a point. You're going beyond just basic needs. You're getting into a point where you're making people part of the whole thing, and that's what McGregor said we weren't doing. And at the time, he was right. We weren't. There are still companies, I tell you what, there are still theory X managers out there. There are still theory X companies out there that work that way. When I first came out of college in 1986, my first bosses, the majority of them were theory X. And they were hard to work for. A lot of them I liked and I learned stuff from them, but it was mostly on the technical level. On the people level, I didn't learn much. And as time went on, as we got from the late 80s going into the 90s, things started to change because there were more and more managers who were buying into these management theories who I was told when I came out of school were crap. No one wants your textbook stuff. You shut up and listen. I'll tell you how and that's how it was. I had once had a manager, his name was Hap Alberson. I'll never forget it. liked the guy, actually. I liked him. He wasn't a mean guy, but he said to me, he was very much a Theory X manager. And he said to me once, he said, Tim, I worked for Marriott at the time, mind you. Tim, you have an idea, you come and tell it to me, and I'll explain to you how it won't work or why it won't work. I wish he was kidding. He wasn't. He was serious. What ended up happening with these guys in my career, what I saw, is by the time we got into like the early to mid 90s, we were protecting these guys from themselves because things were moving away. You were having more minorities in the workforce with you. You were having more women in the workforce with you. And these guys didn't know how to properly speak to people, and they didn't treat people respectfully, and it was getting ugly. And a lot of them just ended up having to retire because they were just never going to be able to adjust. You can't, if you're speaking to a woman, you address her by her name. You don't call her sweetie or honey or baby, which is kind of stuff they used to do. And it was just, they just didn't treat people well. They treat people very degradingly, including me. But, they're gone. They're not gone. You're going to still find Theory X managers, probably not nearly the point of some of the ones I worked for back in the day. But as the younger managers came in that era, and we're not young anymore, but we were then, we changed things. We pretty much shoved those guys out of the way and started doing things this way. And our companies grew. And I saw my industry change because of it. The hospitality industry became a much better place to work because we started going with more Theory Y. We started treating people properly and giving them proper time off and making sure they had the right benefits and letting them, giving them paths to grow and letting them be part of the solution. And all of a sudden, bang, things change and change for the better. All right, it's 2:04. You're getting out 1 minute early today. All right, everyone happy about that? All right, 1 minute early. Actually not. All right, it'll be 2:05 here in a second. All right, any questions on today? No questions?
Nope.
All right, guys. Yes, Nicole? Or did
No.
you say no? All right. All right, guys. Great class. I will see you on Thursday. Remember, by Thursday night, you got to finish up your midterm, so please get that done. And I will see everybody on Thursday, and then we will rock and roll into spring break. Take care.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a good day. See you all Thursday.
All right.